Hello everybody, welcome back to another video. Today's video, we are at the Cheekwood Exposition of Elegance down in Nashville, Tennessee. Absolutely beautiful day, beautiful cars, beautiful show. We have quite the turnout. We got, just in the past couple hours, upwards of 1,000 or more people. Again, plenty of beautiful cars. This video will be a small completion. I'm going to do a little bit of walkthrough and then take some pictures. And I'm going to be talking with a couple people who are behind the show. And yeah, just again, beautiful show, beautiful day, beautiful cars. So let's get right into the video. Here's something you don't see every day. We're at the Cheekwood Car Show down in Belmead, Nashville area. Figured I'd show. We don't show a whole lot of cars at the show. I'm always walking around doing interviews, filming other vehicles. But here's me and Mark detailing out. We have 3 Chryslers here to detail and get ready for the show, so figured I'd film them all while they're detailing.
Days you had 1 and 2 cylinders, and things that barely run, barely get you across the lot. So we didn't.
So, oh, this is the better microphone. Thank you so much. So, initially it had cylinder wars, this increasing complexity, valve train, increasing number of cylinders. I'm competing with a clarinet. Right. So, back in the turn of the last century, people were racing and innovating, and this was on all fronts. So you're talking about engine configuration, you're talking about metallurgy, so even just the ability to cast an engine block and have it survive combustion was a major accomplishment. And this was started in America and in Europe. But can we turn the music down or off or something? Not that what I'm saying is all incorrect. So, anyway, the engines became more complex, increasing the complexity of valve trains, increasing horsepower and speed and endurance. And this sort of determined the kind of racing that was done. I mean, if you can believe it or not, back in the aughts, they had races that literally went across Europe, across Africa. I mean, there was a Paris to Dakar, Africa race. And if you know these machines at all, you know you're lucky to make it 10 miles. And then you start, you know, going 1,000 miles, 2,000 miles, getting there and coming back, and you know, having Bedouins taking pot shots at you along the way. So these were really heroic times. A car company, you could do that. You had the drive and the determination and, dare I say, grit to do such a thing. So William Lyons founded Jaguar, and they immediately went racing as well with the SS100. And then later, post-war, they started right away. They'd actually been working on a lot of the designs during the war in their spare time. I guess they were helping with the war effort too, but they were working on their own stuff at the same time. So almost right away, it was 1948, they came out with the Jaguar XK120 that I guess it debuted at the Earl's Court Motor Show in London, and that was a sensation. We've got an example of that out there. It's the light green car owned by Tim Bowles, and that car is set up as a privateer racer. So you would have racing teams that were sponsored by the manufacturer. So Jaguar had an official Jaguar racing team. But if you were somebody with some money and the inclination to go racing yourself, you could buy the stuff from Jaguar and basically run as what's called a privateer. So that car is set up as a privateer racer, and many people had success with that as well. After the 120 came the 140, 150, each one of them an evolution. And after that, the XKE, and we've got several E-types out there that are indicative of sensational styling and a continuation of a truly impressive engine. Dual overhead cam, big oil sump, and as long as you were reasonably careful with it, fairly indestructible. So that engine with some modification won Le Mans 4 times, 51, 52, 55. So Jaguar was highly successful. Austin Healey was another manufacturer. We've got the 100M out there, which is a very sporty model, and it's gotten a lot of press as one of the fast ones. So
yeah, you're fine.
Spare cat with grit and dirt in your teeth, to the Austin Healey 100M with dirt and grit in your teeth, but going a whole lot faster. This show really gives a wide range. There's a Packard Indianapolis pace car here. I'm going to let the owner, Alan, talk about that. It's his car. I'm going to let him give a lecture about that. Anyway. Well, I guess a rumble seat would be considered super dangerous by modern standards, but having ridden back there myself, it's not so bad. You'd have steps, so you don't have to step on the actual paint. And then rubber. so, safety, yeah, go ahead. So Robert's going to, the lovely Robert Hall will demonstrate entering the rumble seat. And this convertible top actually has a rear glass, which can be brought up in case you actually want to talk to your passengers. I guess when the mother-in-law gets back there, you undo these buttons and you put it down. Robert mentioned safety glass, so that was, automobile races happened immediately as the second car was built, and also automobile accidents started happening right away. So safety actually became a priority in the 20s, and Stutz, the same manufacturers making Bearcat over there, they actually had a model called the Safety Stutz, and it had the first iteration of safety glass. So they started out with just plate glass in the windows, and you'd be in bad shape if you wrecked one of these. Stutz safety glass actually had chicken wire inside it, and so you can see through it, but it's got chicken wire pattern. But eventually they came up with laminated safety glass that breaks into the little squares and doesn't shatter and fly everywhere. But you were still in big trouble if you wrecked one of these. There's actually a book, if anybody's interested. There's a collection of car wreck photographs from the teens, 20s, and 30s, which is very interesting. There was actually a story in my family. My great aunt had a 1932 Cadillac, and she hit a horse with it in Oklahoma driving at night, and believe it or not, the horse lost because that thing was made really tough. So some of these higher end cars were made very, very heavy, but still little to no safety equipment. Anything else I haven't covered? Wrapping it. Any other questions? Yes. That's an excellent question. So the body panels are original. I have a feeling that the wheels were located from another car and put on there. They're correct wire wheels. I do have some photographs of the restoration process. I mean, and you get underneath and you look at the frame rails, and there's rust pitting in the frame rails, so you know it was pretty bad shape when it came out of the garage. But the guy that restored it was an expert in Gardner, and it was done absolutely 100% correct as it would have come off.
Still working?
In St. Louis. So, yeah, it's really something. All of these cars are just an amazing testament to the past. And anybody have any favorites? Well, asking a car person their favorite kind of car is a very difficult question to answer. It's kind of like, well, it depends on what time of the year it is. It depends on what the weather is, what my mood is, what am I doing? Am I just tootling around, or am I driving fast? That kind of thing. So I'd have to say, for rarity and historical significance, I'd have to say that the Indianapolis Packard is my favorite. It's just incredible. So, but the sports cars are great too. It just depends on what you want to do that particular day. So, anyway, thank you all very much, and thank you so much for attending the show. We really appreciate it. We couldn't do this without attendance, and we really appreciate the interest and your presence here.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cheap World. Please join us at 10 a.m. for Car Talk with Adam Ellis. Car number 3.
Sorry.
Say what? Let's get a picture of you.
Luckily, it's supposed to be like a lot cooler than it was over the week.
This is our third annual classic car show here at Cheapwood. It's called the Exposition of Elegance. We started about 3 years ago with a very small show of only about 17 cars. We had a big turnout, so we sensed there was a lot of demand in the community, so we expanded it. Last year was 27 cars, this year is over 50. Next year we expect to have probably close to 70 cars. We've got 50-odd extraordinary cars out here today. The cars themselves are really just magnificent in different ways, and yet in many ways are the same. All of these cars are the embodiment of American ingenuity, the American spirit, and American aspiration. The 1920s, 30s, 40s, 50s, it's a period of time when America was dominating the world in many respects, newly dominating the world. And the cars reflect the ambition and the aspiration of the American people and of the people that designed the cars. So they're really, in many respects, they were transportation, yes, but they're also rolling works of art, pieces of sculpture. You see that when you interact with them. They're really just stunning in terms of their design. And considering that they're 80 to 100 years old, they're stunning mechanically as well. The level of innovation that they represent is quite extraordinary. Of course, it goes without saying, these cars would be beautiful anywhere that you could have the opportunity to see them, but to see them in an environment like Cheapwood, which is of the same era, by the way, and also represents the American aesthetic of the early 20th and mid-20th century. It's just a perfect combination. The weather is beautiful, so it's a beautiful day to see the cars, see them against the backdrop of Cheapwood, and it's just a really enjoyable day. We've already had, looks like over 1,000 people come in the first couple hours of the show, so we expect probably over the weekend to have close to 10,000 people come through.
Awesome.
Has been in my family since 1952. My brother took it in trade from the original owner and in 1952, and he gave her a brand new Plymouth in exchange. And he had his shop restore it and used it in parades, and eventually he retired and took it to our farm in Ohio and then moved to Florida, and it sat in the barn and kind of deteriorated. And so I finally said, Bill, how about if I buy it from you? He thought about that a while, and he said, reach in your wallet and see if you've got $1 in there. And actually, I should have charged him about $20,000 to take it on, because I had it restored. I got it in 1966, and I had it restored in 1999, and of course, I had a lot of work done on it in the meantime. This is a 1931, and you can see what it is right there. And I had it totally restored. And this is a 37 and Mark Seabold, which is standing right here, and rebuilt it. And he's going to tell you the story about that. And then after he tells you the story about it, I'm going to start talking about Walter Chrysler. He is somebody very, very special, and I wrote out what I was going to say, and I thought, you know, people are going to be bored to death if I just start reading on this. And this right here is the book on Walter Chrysler, but it goes into a lot of detail about how the Chrysler family got into the United States, and it's 640 pages. And so, you know, how do you condense 640 pages? And then here's his autobiography, which is only 200 and some pages, and it was a little easier to condense. But anyway, I'm going to let you get started, and here's the microphone right here.
Thank you, Jim.
Mark Seabold.
We picked up the 37 Chrysler, kind of found me. I was out driving in a 1931 Chrysler coupe, and I went out to McMinnville to a car cruise and got talking to some old people. He showed me a picture of this. He picked it up out of Kentucky from a relative. The grandchildren of this car were going to take it and make it a hot rod. Grandmom said no. Called their uncle. Uncle came up and traded him a Chevelle and a Camaro and took it home. Well, the uncle was 70 years old. I met him 2 weeks after he purchased the car in McMinnville. Long story short, I purchased the car for Jim 2 days later from him. And we took it home and took it completely apart, every nut and bolt, and redid the car. It was in really good shape, but it had just been sitting since 1970. Every single, like I said, every single nut and bolt was taken apart on the car and remade, redone, and replaced. It is pretty timely. You'll spend a year or two on a lot of different components in the car. Everything is not very easily to find when they only produce 320 of these cars. There is only 4 known to exist. One's in the Chicago Museum. One is up in Allentown at Nicholas Bigari's shop, and 2 of them I have. One I had come in from California, and this one that we found local. You just do not stumble across this type of car. But they are a very timely, considerable process. But the engineering and the way this car is built, these are the last few years that Walter P. Chrysler was involved in the Imperial. He passed away, what, 2-3 years following this car? Yeah. So it wasn't very long after this that he passed away, it's 4 years. But this and the limousine he was hands-on. He was with the crew while they were designing and building it. And it really does show in engineering and how this car handles. No offense to a Chevy or a Ford, but there's no comparison in the engineering that was on this compared to them. I've been the same year cars, and this car just handles, drives down the road so much differently. But I don't really have a lot more to say about it. I mean, any questions I can answer for you or anything, I'd be glad to.
So for the parts, did you have to like fabricate them, or
No, every single thing has to be fabricated.
Okay.
The stainless steel rings on these are smashed in. Okay, so I made a die and remade these on the Pullmax machine. The headlights were half full of body putty. So they're all hand remade and they're all metal now, and all the body putty is replaced with lead. So the stainless steel, no, I was fortunate. They're original. The same with the black car. I'm very fortunate that way. Most of the components were with this car. The grill, the side pot metal was very decayed. We strip all the pot metal and put it in electrolysis and remove all the chrome. And then I take all the pits and everything out of all the pot metal. Now, I use a company that's up in Ohio called D&D Brightworks for all our chrome. I send it up to them. He puts it in copper. He sends it back. I file it and match it to the metal until I get a perfect fit again. Because the same with the hood ornament that's up on the top is your latch. It has to fit properly for the rotation of it. So it can't be too thick. You got to go back and sand until you got everything fit. Same with the grill. The grill are all solid straight pieces, and I get them out of Ohio and had them made. But you got to fill them with solder, and then you got to roll them through a machine to get them to roll and stay straight. Then you heat them back up, and then you go back to polishing. Otherwise, when you roll them, they'll twist. And then you got to make all the grooves underneath, and they slide over those pieces. So.
Is that the hardest part of the grill?
I don't know. It's tedious and timely. If you get doing something, it's really time. The hardest part of all the trim was the rear pieces that go over the back. Getting them to re-arch and make all the back pieces. So, I'm sorry, I go away. Any other questions from anybody? I'll pass it back to Jim.
Okay, by the way, that 1925 is the second year that Walter Chrysler had his own name on a car. And I'm going to get into some detail about the past, but that engine is 200, it's a six-cylinder, 201 cubic inch, 4.7 compression ratio, and a 68 horsepower at 3,000 RPM, which I'm sure some of you are very interested in. Anyway, to get back to Walter Chrysler, and I thought I'd tell you a little bit about how the Chrysler family got here, and it has a lot to do with what kind of person that he turned out to be. If you go back, depending on what scientists you talk to, 12 to 20,000 years ago, the Asians came over here and populated North and Central and South America. And eventually they got to 50 million American Indians, what we call American Indians. But in about 1400, Europeans started coming over here, and they brought a lot of diseases with them, viruses, and like to do battle, and the Indians like to do battle with each other, the tribes. So when you get to about 60 up going into Canada, and in Canada, we got the lakes there, we got all kinds of game, lots of trees, woods, and if you had what it took, you could survive. And generation after generation, the family gradually moved west in Canada as the population grew, and eventually they got to Walter Chrysler's grandfather, and he brought his family down into the United States below Detroit. He died when he was 39 years old. And so his wife and most of the children moved back to Canada. Walter's father, Henry, said, no, I'm not going to do that. And he stayed, and he moved in with the family. And we get to 1862, and Hank knew about slavery. He had heard lots of stories about what went on in Europe and the lack of freedom over there. And so here he is, 12 years old, and he tries to get in the Army. And the Army says, he says, Hank, you're just 12 years old. We can't take you. Anyway, he persists, and he becomes a drummer boy. And he stays in the military until 1865. And then goes to work for a railroad. And we're now getting to where he marries. He's working Northern Pacific, and he's now living in Ellis, Kansas. And we have Walter is the third child, and he has an older sister and an older brother. Walter is a very, very special person. He's very high IQ, very serious work ethic. He made friends easily. He was very marble champion in Ellis. He could beat the adults, he could beat his friends, and mostly came out and hit up with the marbles a great deal of the time. Well, he then graduates in 1897 from high school. He was born in 75. And he graduates from high school, and he doesn't want to go to college. His father wants him to go to college, and he doesn't want to do that. So he becomes an apprentice and learns how to rebuild, how to maintain railroad engines and cars and track and all that sort of thing. Well, he was so special that when he finished in 4 years, he was the top of his class. He could do things with the railroad engine that most people couldn't do, and so he went to work there. He graduated. He stayed there for a year or two and then decided to move on. And what he did was he went to Salt Lake City, he went to all kinds of different places, and he was learning the whole time. And eventually, in 1904, he had been promoted again and again and again, married, had 4 children of his own, and was in charge of many miles of track. He was in charge of buying all the locomotives and the cars, and was doing just great. But his boss, who was stationed in Chicago, called him into the office one day, and so he goes to Chicago, and he's ushered into his boss's office, and he stands in front of the boss at his desk, and the boss doesn't pay attention to him. He's doing his own thing, and so Walter goes and sits down a minute, and then tries to read a newspaper. He can't do that. He's beginning to stand. He gets back up and he stands in front of his boss again, and finally the boss pays attention to him. And Walter says, why do you want me? What's going on? Well, there was a hot box on one of the trains going to St. Louis. And what about it? Tell me about it. I've been on the road all week. I don't think about it, but I certainly find out about it. And that's not good enough. You need to know about it, and you need to tell me about it. So they argued that way. Walter's got a whole roll of chances in his pocket because he can get on any train that he wants to just pass. So he reaches in his pocket and his boss thinks, uh-oh, I'm in trouble. Something's going to happen. Walter rolls the wallet down and he says, I quit. So he slams the doors, he goes out of the office, and he goes downstairs, and the railroad station is right next to this office. And so he goes down to the bar. and the boss knows darn well that he made a terrible mistake getting rid of Walter. Because Walter was something more special. So he sends a friend of Walter's to try to talk him out. And they talk, and finally Walter says, yeah, I'm not going to do it. So Walter heads for the railroad station to the gate, and the gate master says, where are you going to have your ticket? Well, Walter doesn't have a ticket, he doesn't have a pass, so his friend gives him one. Anyway, he goes home and tells his wife that he quit his job. She was a very special lady herself. So, as I said, he was in charge of buying all kinds of railroad equipment. So he was well known in the industry. So he calls the president of Alpha, American Locomotive Company, and says, can you get me a job? And to make that story a little shorter than it really is, he goes to Pittsburgh and gets a job there, and the plant wasn't doing too well. And in 18 months, he makes a great profit and increases their sales dramatically. Well, about then, there's a person, a man on the board of Alco and General Motors. And he calls Walter and he says, how would you like a job at Buick and be the works manager? Yeah, I'd like to do that. And so, make a long story short, Nash is the president of the Buick plant there. And he's the one who founded Nash Automobiles. And so Nash says, well, go out in the plant and tell me what you see. So he goes out in the plant, and there are a whole bunch of things that he saw, but one of them was that he watched the cars going out as they were being tested. And then he watched them come back. And he noticed that the same number that went out wasn't coming back. And so, that and a bunch of other things he tells Nash, and Nash hires him on the spot, and Alco didn't want to lose him and offered him $12,000, and Nash wouldn't pay him more than $6,000. Well, Walter, he wanted to be in the automobile. And in no time at all, he got production from 45 cars a day to 70. He reduced costs significantly, and Buick became the most profitable car of General Motors. And so things were really going good. Now I got to tell you a little bit about Billy Durant. I don't know if any of you have heard of Billy Durant, but anyway, he was the founder of General Motors. And he went to work there. He was there, and in 1911 and 12, he was spending General Motors money faster than they can produce profit, cash flow. So they fired him in 1950. Well, he goes and meets, he knows a race driver called Charles Chevrolet. And you all know who Charles Chevrolet is. So Billy and Walter found Chevrolet Corporation. And he uses profits from Chevrolet when they got going, and he keeps buying General Motors stock. And he buys General Motors stock. And he already has stock of his own, and his friends that have stock. So in 1916, he goes to a General Motors annual meeting. And he walks in with all these stock certificates. Back then, it wasn't electronic. You just had 5 shares and 10 shares and 100 shares or whatever. And he had all this stock. And he goes up to the front where the whole directors are, and he says, I now own General Motors. Sure, Billy. I'm not kidding. So he takes all these certificates and puts them out on the table, and they spend hours counting them, and sure enough, he does own General Motors. He owns control of it. So he gets to name all of the directors and so on. Well, in the meantime, Walter Chrysler and Nash and a New York investment banker decided they were going to go find their own company. Well, they were going to do that. They were going to buy Packard, and that didn't work. Well, anyway, Billy Durant didn't want to lose Walter Chrysler. So what does he do? He goes to Walter Chrysler and he says, I've got a deal for you. I'll pay you. Meantime, Walter's earning, well, he'd gotten a raise. He was making $50,000 a year at that point. He said, I'll pay you $500,000 a year. Well, that sounds good. And I'll give you $10,000 a month. And at the end of the year, you can use the $380,000 that is left and take it in a check, or you can buy General Motors stock as an option at the price that General Motors is on the day we sign this contract. So that'd be a hard one to turn down. So and Walter said, all right, I'll tell you what I'll do, but I don't want you interfering with me. You let me run things. And Billy put him on the board of directors and made him a works manager and in charge of production and so on. So Billy couldn't help it. So in 2 years, finally Walter had enough and he quits. So he exercised his options. And he had $10 million worth of stock, which he has cash in hand because Billy Graham and several people didn't want him to throw it in the market, so they bought him out. So he's got $10 million and he retires. He's 45 years old. And so he goes home and he spends a lot of time at his house. And he's got all his friends and hunting and fishing and doing all kinds of just fun things. And finally his wife says, Walter, you're making a terrible mess of the house. The cigar smoke, everything's just, you got to go back to work. So Walter says, well, okay, I'll go back to work. So he goes, he starts getting calls, and he has already been getting calls, and he gets a call from one New York investment banker who's loaned $50 million to Willys Durant. Well, Willys was a good salesman, but he wasn't real good at production. And so they were losing money. So he says, I'll tell you what I'll do. This is after negotiation. He says, you pay me $1 million a year for 2 years, and I'll do the job. In 2 years, he pays the debt down to $18 million and has the company profitable, and that's enough. Well, in the meantime, he's getting another call from Maxwell, and they've got a problem. They've got $26 million in debt, and they want him to straighten that out. And so he got a little different plan this time. So he wants a salary of $100,000 a year, and he wants an option on all the stock. And so he gets that going, and then he goes to bankers and says, all right, I want to exercise my option, and I want you to loan me $15 million. Now, how many bankers would agree to do that unless you're talking about somebody awful special? And they do. And so in 1924, he puts his own badge on, and shortly thereafter, you all heard of Dodge, the Dodge brothers. They have a plant that's about 3 times the size of Walter's, and they died. And the widows kept it for a few years, and then sold it to a New York investment banker, and within a very short time, he realized that he made a terrible mistake. As an investment banker getting into the automobile business. So he talks to Walter, and they negotiate back and forth. They spend 4 days in a hotel room, and Walter buys it. And he puts the Chrysler name on the plant, and it's the Dodge division of Chrysler. So that's when he founded Plymouth and Dodge and DeSoto. So you got the full Plymouth, Dodge, DeSoto, Chrysler. In 1928, that made Walter Chrysler's company one of the big 3. They were, and from that until after the war, Second World War, Walter Chrysler and Ford Motor Company went back and forth for second. And you got to remember, there were over 200 companies in existence when Walter started his own company, and there were 26 of them that were doing something. So I've taken you into Walter Chrysler, and the story's getting shorter and shorter now. You don't have to listen much longer. But anyway, Walter Chrysler died in 1940, so he was 65 years old. In 1937, the UAW began to really expand in the auto industry, and between 1937 and after the war, they demanded higher and higher wages and less work, and things started really getting bad. eventually, you know, the General Motors and Chrysler ended up declaring bankruptcy. And Ford almost did. And they were no longer the big three after that. And now you know that Nissan and other companies are a big part of the auto industry. You can look around wherever you park and you see all kinds of cars that aren't. You see very few Chryslers anymore, and you see I don't see as many Cadillacs as you do. You see a lot of Lexus. Anyway, I think I can stop there. And these are some of the books that I have that involve the industry. And if you got any questions, maybe I can answer them, maybe I can't. But anyway, if you get really interested in the auto industry, you can get on Amazon, and there are just all kinds of wonderful books that you can buy and read. Thank you for listening.
Oh, that is horribly out of alignment. Oops. Oh boy. Here, let me fix this. Here's something you don't get to see every day. We're here at the Cheekwood Country Club. What do they call it? Of all the cars, a couple interviews with some people who are running the show. And I'm gonna restart that. This lens is bugging me. It always moves. It never stays still. It always moves. I'm gonna talk with one of the heads of the show. And yeah, I'm gonna redo that because that is man. I can't decide what I want.
Mark Siegel, the owner and operator of Graveyard Run Restorations. Jim kind of put me on the spot. This is not what I do. But I'm glad to ask any questions on this car and anything.
Mark,
put it up to my face a little bit. Okay.
so we can hear you.
Y'all hear me good now? No. A little closer? There we go. Okay. Told you I'm not doing this.
You're doing great.
Anyway,